Yep, ready when you are, Chair. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to those in the room and those who are watching this EAP of Connected Communities online. For those in the room, can I remind people to keep their phones on mute and their computers on silent. Moving on to item 1, apologies for absence. Thank you very much, Chair. So we've received apologies from Councillors Richard Lavelle, Ian Jelly and Valerie Anslow. We have Councillor John McGee acting as a substitute for Councillor Anslow. Thank you very much. Thank you. Any declarations of interest, gentlemen? No? Okay. I have the minutes of the meeting held on the 28th of February in front of me. Can I sign those as a true record? Everybody happy? In fact, I do think you were here on that occasion as well, Councillor McGee. Yes. Thank you very much. Okay, moving swiftly on, we have Simon Mills here, who's our Assistant Director for Customer Experience, is it? And he is going to present a customer services operation update. So without further ado, over to you, Simon.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. So today I've got a customer service operation update, which is a similar report that was taken to corporate scrutiny last week. I thought it would be good as well to get some further feedback and to share that with members at our Connected Communities Board as well. I've also attached with this pack the service plan for customer services for this next year, alongside our team charter. And the reason for doing so is after I've gone through the two transformational updates, there is some information about how the service is looking this year and what we're going to be doing to bring the team closer to one working ethos, and how we're going to start to bring that about. And the team have been very much a part of developing and designing that team charter. So again, an opportunity for members to have a look through that and also offer any advice and some feedback on it as well. So without further ado, I'll just go through the update, which starts with our two transformation projects. So over the past 12 to 18 months, we've been going through two capitally funded transformation projects, which relate to our telephony and our customer relationship management system. I'll start with the CRM system, as is most commonly referred to. This started in October 2022 and is looking to finalise in October 2024. It's done with a supplier called PlaceCube, and what we've been doing with this rollout is replacing any existing customer relationship management systems, some which were coming out of contract, and replacing it with one digital platform space. In some of our hubs, there actually wasn't a CRM system in place, so it's enabled us to actually enhance those interactions, to be able to capture that data from those hubs that didn't necessarily benefit from it before. It's been done in a number of phases, and so far we have seen our Haylock House hub, which is based in Kettering, and our Frapston hub, as well as our back office waste service team, all go into the new dashboard and the CRM capability reporting. So what we've pulled out in the report, I won't necessarily go through, but happy to sort of discuss any questions that you might have had, having read through it yourselves, is we've just broken down in terms of each phase that we're doing, what has gone well, what we've learnt from that implementation period as well, and how we've then used that to inform our continuous rollout of this programme, because it's a 2-year programme that we've been doing with this one in particular. We have commenced with what we're calling our phase 2A and 2B, and that was at the back end of last year, and finalised in Wellingborough as well with waste as we came out of Christmas. And we're now, as I say, progressing on at quite a pace for the next approach, which is phase 3. And it doesn't necessarily allude to that in this paper, but as an update in terms of where that is going to be, we're looking to be onboarding our Corby hub onto the CRM system on the 20th of May. So just short of a month, we'll have another hub operating on that platform, which is really good news. There is some integrations that we've been doing with the Corby area from its existing CRM system, because Corby was one of our hubs that did have a pre-existing system, and they've been going in really well, so we are looking to deliver that on time, which is good news. And then we have our last hub to focus on, which is phase 3B, which will be the Kettering Bond Green Road hub, which we're looking to do, as I say, by the end of October. There are a few integrations that we are having to do that are a bit different to the previous rollouts, which is why that time window is a little bit longer, but all being well, having gone through multiple waves of this now, we should be in a position that will be delivered on time. One of the more complex integrations is to do with the payment forms that current CRM system does. And as we've gone through a new payment system in Northampton in January, it's just making sure that the staff who currently take payments through a CRM platform can continue to do it when they do it on the new PlaceCube one. So we just need to make sure we get those configurations right. So in terms of what we're doing, what we're going to be looking at next, I've kind of gone into the next bits around the next phase, but we're going to be looking at how we can then start to harmonise some of the services which all have a customer journey through our CRM system. And one of those that presents itself quite nicely at the moment is waste. So it'll mean that we can look at how any of our hubs can do a waste interaction for any of our customers across the whole district. It doesn't have to be done by location. The form that has been created on PlaceCube enables us to be able to specifically go through a line of inquiry, by a postcode, but you don't have to be trained in a specific area to be able to do that. So if you've got a different criteria for a missed bin with one of our bin refuse collectors in one area, the form will allow you to take it through, so any advisor will be able to complete that form, which is a great enhancement to that, because you've just increased potentially the amount of advisors that could answer that inquiry from 10, for example, to 30, which is really good news. And we'll then be looking at how we can also do that with garden waste, because garden waste will then follow through the same form platform in October, which means we'll be able to benefit from that going into the garden waste subscription window next year as well. We've also been looking at how we record avoidable and unavoidable data within the CRM system. And so when all the hubs are doing that, we'll have a real consistent picture. And this is enabling us to have some really good data to have service liaison meetings with the services that we operate with. So when we're talking about avoidable and unavoidable contact, it's whether or not that transaction needed to come through customer services or whether it didn't. And if it didn't need to come through, we'll be able to detail the reasons why. So most common things could be unnecessary clarification because we've sent out a letter that was confusing and didn't need to be. Digital contact method available. And when we're looking at that assessment as well, the advisor isn't just going, oh, you can do that online, that's that box. They're discussing with the customer about their means and access and assessing whether that customer had the ability to do it online rather than just saying, you can do it online, why haven't you done it online? So we've got some really good criteria that teams to be able to make those assessments as well. We can therefore have some good conversations with those services to look at how we can improve what we're doing and the themes of conversations that are coming through. So that's a really good data set that we can start to interrogate a bit more. So if we just go on to the 8x8 system, so that's our cloud-based telephony system. This went live last June, the 14th. This has onboarded all our 6 customer service hubs onto one cloud-based platform. We had multiple different telephony systems prior to that. Some were more advanced than others. Some were more towards the end of their life cycle. There was different routes in that customers had, which were fragmented, and by bringing it onto one platform, not only was it an opportunity to have one contract for telephony, but a better picture of our customer contact. So this went live as planned last year, and since then the teams have been able to start putting out some of the reports to discover some of those trends from those calls now coming through. So again, we've broken down onto the report what went well and lessons that we've learned in terms of how what we can learn next time for similar rollouts. And I think then what I think is really important is what we're going to do next with this system. The system itself has got a multitude of things that we can do with what we've purchased with the license base, and it's trying to look at how those enhancements can be done around some of the biggest pinch points that we have on our IVR. So we've been looking at, for example, how we can start to cross-chain services. So I've mentioned previously around the waste aspect, being able to have bigger resilience within our agent groups to be able to answer calls. We've done another example with our Wellingborough hub as well, where they've been assisting with a high volume of calls we get for the blood NHS service. We see 370 interactions a day come through just for that one service over in Kettering. And they've been able to help with that because we've been able to review the admin tasks that the team are doing, and therefore be able to enable them to be able to take some more calls. So there've been some things already that we've started to do that have, benefited the demand that's coming through. We've also been able to get the teams to operate more hybrid and have the option to work from home, because some of our teams wasn't able to do that previously. They were wired into a hard phone, and their systems will enable them to do emails from home. So we've had that ability to do that as well, and that's fed into our team charter principle around the teams actually having the option to be able to go and work in different sites across our patch and collaborate with team members as well, because the telephony system now enables them to take a call, essentially, whether there's a Wi-Fi connection, whether there's a VPN connection. So they can do so in multiple offices, which is really good for us to be able to get the teams to share those experiences. We're going to be looking at how we can amend the structure of the IVR. So I think it's important to acknowledge that when the IVR was onboarded last June, we had a Future Northants creation where we brought in those 5 different areas onto one platform with all these different endpoints, which essentially were direct numbers that went into another phone system. That has been lifted and put onto a system, but essentially the actual layout of it hasn't changed that dramatically. And I think it's important that we have the opportunity now to look at how we can start to amend that, reduce down the amount of options wherever possible, to make it as easy to navigate through the season, for the IVR as easy as possible as well. We're going to be looking at the terminology that's used on the IVR. So that's, going back to principles of plain English. An example that could be, not to pick on my services here, but environmental health and environmental services. They're 2 very different services, but how is a customer supposed to distinguish between which one is which? We should just be referring to things as they are. This is the option here for your bins, etc. So we're going to be going through it with a very fine-tooth comb to try and make sure that it reflects the options that our customers are trying to navigate to as well. And I mentioned that on the previous transformation rollout around the income management system, that has now enabled us to put a payment option right at the front of the IVR. So when customers are coming through for the first time, it allows them to press a soft key, which is the star key, to make a payment and go through to the NNC payment phone line, which is available 24/7. Previously, we had those platforms buried on each different service line. So if you were going to have to pay for council tax, you'd have to probably press an additional 10 numbers to get to a council tax option to find that payment option. By moving it to the front now, you just need to press one key and you can go and make your payment without having to navigate through the IVR, or potentially in some instances navigate incorrectly through the IVR and make a payment to the wrong account, which in itself causes more problems for that customer as well. So it's a really key change, and really glad was able to get that following the income management system go live in January. On the back of that as well, we acknowledge that there is a significant amount of work that we can be doing with this system, and it's trying to pull those ideas together and making sure the time and the resource we have is focused on doing the things that have the biggest impact. So we have pulled together a customer experience transformation program board, which is looking at specific work streams under 5 separate product headers, one of them being infrastructure and another one being the one front door approach. And the IVR has links to both of those work streams. So we are looking at how we can start to make those changes in real time. Some of those may require more in-depth conversations with our supplier to exploit further, but there are things that we can start to do. For example, we are in the process of reviewing our general inquiries option. So if you've navigated for the IVR, that's underneath option number 5. It's the last option on there. We last year took 40,000 calls through to that option. So it's the longest one you have to navigate through to get to, but equally, when you get to that end point, you might have to then go through to another queue to get to the right person to speak to about your inquiry, depending on what it is. Which is why it's important to identify that we need to try and do something better with those 40,000 customers that navigated through there. So what we're looking to do is removing the option altogether and having a soft key effect that says, we've read you the menu, if you can't find your option, press this button now and we'll put you through to an advisor who will then be able to help you. And it'll cut that journey by at least 50%, having to navigate through the different menus. So, and again, that's going to be built into the resilience on all the agent hubs. So rather than it going through to an advisor who sits in our Corby hub, it'll go through to the next available agent that I have, and that could be somebody sat over in Kettering, and they would then triage that call. The optimum would be to respond to that interaction as much as they can using what access they've got, using the website, and if they can't do so, they would then put it into the corresponding colleague who can. But that will speed up that process for those customers, and say that was 40,000 last year alone that had to go through that journey. So some really good things we're looking at, just to give a bit more context. I appreciate that wasn't in the initial report, but it's probably more of a real-time update of some of the stuff we're looking at. Okay, so if I take a pause there, we can then go into, I've pulled in the performance stats for the full year. So when I went to scrutiny, that was up until Q3. This is now the full year stats. But before we go into that, and then the next steps for the team, as well as the operation, I just wanted to sort of pause and give an opportunity to members for any questions on the rollout to transformation.
Thank you. Has the phone system been completely isolated from West Northants now?
So we've concluded the telephony rollout. So in terms of our customer service-based system, that was never with West. It went last year, and we've just finished, I believe, doing the hard phones for country parks and our libraries, because there were some of the outliers that we had to replace a physical phone set with, as well as some of our adult social care hubs. So yes, that's the telephony project and rollout has now concluded. And the only exception would be is if we are dependent on a West Northants service to provide a service for us. So if it's Children's Trust, that still routes out to a contact in West Northants. But in terms of our telephony infrastructure, that's now within our own hands.
So to clarify that one, it would come into our telephone system and then be routed out to West Northants?
Correct, yes. It has a DDI that it points to, which goes through to an agent group in West, because they deal with our children's calls. Yeah.
Okay.
Anything else would either go to the contact centre or would go through to a hunt group, which is our officers who handle their own calls for those services if they do.
Councillor McGee.
Thank you, Chair. There is a lot of work going on, and I know there's a lot of frustration, not only with councillors and staff on the changes. We all know that, I think. We were at scrutiny last week and there was a lot of disconcerting voices there. Myself and the chair were on the last authority, and we know a lot of staff around there, and I've been talking to some of the staff, and you mentioned in here that bringing staff with you, consulting with them, etc. And my feedback from staff is actually, if they've got a query and they've got to contact another department or get advice or whatever, they're finding that nearly impossible at present. And you know, that's not one staff I've spoke to, and it wasn't even in Corby, it was in Wellingborough and Kettering. And if the staff internally are feeling that, it feels like they've not been brought forward with it. And if we don't bring the staff with us, and then it's not going to work properly. And asking staff to be the all-knowing knowledge and have all the different skills, I think that's a difficult ask, and it takes a long time for that to happen. You need a lot of training, etc. And I know there's some discontent among some of our staff, especially in the frontline staff who are struggling to get the answers. I mean, one says we try and phone, we can't get through. We send an email, we can wait up to 5 days to get an answer from that, and that's internal staff. That's not good. We need to be sorting that out and bringing them with us, or we're not going to succeed in this. The other thing I would like to ask, actually, how many staff are we talking about? Because this is a big process, a big transformation. It's going to cost for the IT system, etc. There's a lot of cost being put in already. How many staff are we actually talking on this? Because I think that's important. And actually, the whole thing about this, and I'm sure we'll come on to it in the next bit, is if we don't get the customer satisfaction, and then we're not getting it right at all anyway.
Thank you, Councillor McGee, for some really good points. In terms of the internal frustrations, I alluded to that bit initially with around the service liaison meetings. At the moment, we don't have a set suite of service liaison meetings, and that's the really critical point to raise those frontline issues. So we've started doing that. So there's a way for the teams to be able to share those concerns. So we have a monthly meeting, which with myself, where the team are rotated in to attend. We discuss performance, but we also then just have a bit of an open table around anything that's going on that we need to be aware of, and I can then channel that into those meetings, but also be able to share some of those experiences that those team members are having. We've been doing those now since November of last year. But the liaison, but getting that back into the services to actually try and traction that change, that's a really key thing, and we have started doing that. So one of the services that has already got that put in, and we're coming up to the third meeting that we've been doing that with now, is waste services. And what we're going to start seeing when we go to those conversations, not only capturing that staff feedback and that frustration, is also being able to take that data from the CRM system to say, this is your service scorecard basically from the contact centres. These are the volumes we're handling. This is the unavoidable contact. This is the avoidable contact, and these are the streams, and this is the staff feedback. So we're going. It's in progress, and I think it's really important that we have that approach, because the team need to be able to have an opportunity to feed that back in, because they're experiencing it, and we don't want to be making assumptions. We need to make sure that that is incorporated into how we do the transformation. In terms of the skill sets versus training, yes, absolutely. Everybody won't be able to know every single skill set. That's just not possible. So what we're looking at is how we can do transactional services and add that into existing skill sets. So if you take a waste service request, for example, that can be quite transactional because you've got a form that leads you through it. So in terms of the training we need to do with an individual, it's usually a day's worth of training. If you try and roll out, say, council tax training to an individual, that's at least 3 days training, followed by listening in, person doing the calls, etc. It usually has a full-week programme to embed. You wouldn't be given that necessarily to a colleague who already does adult social care, blue badge, pothole inquiries. You'd give them the transactional waste inquiries or the blood booking appointment inquiries. So they would have probably more of a core specialist skill set, and then we overlay that with those more transactional inquiries, so not to overload the staff, because you can only absorb so much. You can't be a specialist in everything. In terms of the staffing numbers, last count, and this is a bit of a movable feast because we do have turnover within our teams, 78 advisors and 9 members of management, and we have 2 complaint practitioners and 2 digital officers within the structure.
You carry on.
If I may, 78 frontline staff, is that customer service related staff, or is that frontline staff in different areas that are answering calls?
That's 78 staff that fall underneath my Directorate of Customer Services. So that is staff who are answering calls, doing the emails, e-forms, face-to-face receptions and appointments.
One more point on this part of it, Chair. I sometimes, I'm sure we all do, and listening to scrutiny last week that I attended as a member of the public, it's there is a lot of frustration about it, but I sometimes think we overcomplicate these things. You know, we were both part of the old county council. For all its failings, it did have a decent customer service. And what I think I can't get to the bottom of this yet, we are starting this from the very bottom up, when actually working through the LGA, APS, the other organisations, there's lots and lots of good practice. I understand we've actually spoke to West Northants, but they're a pretty new council too. So I'm just wondering what real in-depth look have we had from organisations that could have gave us that help to move this thing a bit quicker, because it seems like it's been going on and on and on and we're not quite getting there.
It's also a very good point, Councillor McGee. So we have got we actually got an independent review coming in later in this year, which is the peer challenge, which will be really good to see. But in terms of those, sort of best examples, we have identified, one of our hubs, for example, which has got some good practices around a contact centre setup, and the great aspect of having those 5 different identities coming together is we've all got something that we can bring to the table and make one version that's really good. So we're going through about what works well, why do we do these things, do we need to do these things, and how can we make it better? And that's the journey that we've started. So I've joined in November, and we've started that journey in earnest, and we're having those conversations. We're bringing those team leaders together, those managers together, to share those expertise and actually try and shape a different way of working, rather than going with, we've always done this, so we're carrying doing it, because we all know that we can't carry on doing what we've done. The landscape has changed, the funding has changed. We need to be smarter with what we've got, and we need to make sure we're reacting to it rather than standing still. So it's a very valid point, and it's something that we're doing with the internal mindsets and those heads and that experience. In terms of the external aspects, I don't know if you're aware, I came from West Northants. So I went through the LGA journey with South Northants and Cherwell, going into WNC. And again, I was based in customer service over there as well. So again, I've seen those 3 different identities coming together. I've worked with those teams as well in terms of how we can start to transform the way in which they work. And some of those things have been very identical to what North is doing. And in some instances, North's a bit further down the road with them, which is really heartening to see coming in. But again, having had that experience and that exposure, I'm equally bringing those ideas, those suggestions and those thoughts to the table to try and shape the way we want to move this forward as well.
Yeah, carry on.
I didn't want to unload all at one time. I do have a deep reservation on the push to do as much as possible online. And there's very good reasons for that. There is many people, especially in rural areas, that can't get online for a start, and many older people. And the answer, you talked about, it was number 5, £40,000. They'll go straight through to a person or they'll go on a waiting list for a person, no doubt. How long do we expect that waiting list to be? Because we know people won't wait too long. They'll get frustrated, hang up and keep trying. So how long are we expected that to happen? But I would put a plea in that we don't try and force everything online. There is many, many people out there that just do not know how to do that. And I know it saves money, but we've got to think of our customers.
I completely endorse that. We should be promoting the different contact channels we have to offer that choice. It's about a choice and being able to give our residents, constituents, an informed decision on how they can interact with the council. Where absolutely we need to be seeing our vulnerable customers, we should absolutely be doing so. And I'm a firm believer as well, we don't just talk about a particular age group, we're talking about people who also have means and access. So the fact they can't afford broadband, access to the internet, etc. We have to encompass all of that. So whenever we're making decisions around in any future decision making around how we assess the service, we always would take that under a great degree of consultation, and we would do equality impact assessments to ensure that the decisions we're making are really balanced against our customer demand. But it's really important that we understand our customer base, but at the same time, to be able to enable us to assist those customers that do need it, haven't got those access points. We need to support the customers who can do it by making it really easy. Going back to your point about it being really simple, not complicated, it just needs to be, do you know what, it's Garden Waste sign up, go here and do it here. Okay, for the 10% that do need to come through to us because they can't do it on there, they can, because we're not taking the calls for people who could. And that's the difference. It's absolutely not shutting the door to customers because we want to promote that. It's about trying to enable that more so we're there for those vulnerabilities, because that's what we ultimately need to be doing.
Chair, I actually agree with that, but what I would hate to happen is when we are questioning customers of whether they can do it online, they're not feeling as if they're getting a third degree, or they feel stupid within their cell, because there's a talent to how you talk to people and get the best from that. So I would plead that we do that proper training on that. And one more thing while I was here, Chair, I was talking to one of my residents yesterday in the Kingswood division, and they were saying at one time when they're paying the bills, they could phone up and say, oh, can you tell me the balance and I'll just get that sorted. There's no option now to get a balance. They just get the option whether to pay or now. And they were quite frustrated, this group I was talking to yesterday.
Thank you, Councillor McGee. Is that on that last point, is that the housing payments or the county? Yes, so I'm aware that this changed, I think, pretty much around the turn of the year, didn't it? So that's something we are aware of within the housing teams. I think it's where a system changed, and consequently, as you would imagine, we've seen an influx of contact on our calls coming through because people wish to see that account balance. So that is with the team to address, because it's a no-brainer, isn't it? And again, back to that easy access point and trying to, people able to self-serve without having to come through or have to have that inquiry. That's not good use of a resident's time to have to call up for that. If they had it before, why haven't they got it now? So we have pushed that back because we saw that come through as a theme. So that's good to know, in a way that you've also heard that, because that just sort of validates that reason for us to try and do something with it. And I think in terms of, forgive me, the previous point around the wait time on those queues, we would be able to look at how they will come through quicker, because the wait time they go through that IVR won't be as long. If they go through a general inquiry by pressing a soft key, they would have cut that down by half of the time. And hopefully by having a larger agent group, we know that those agents will be increased, which means it will increase the response time as well. So at the moment, for example, I know that I have, because we've got a workforce management system we're just getting into grips with, it shows by half an hour the amount of advisors I've got available versus the amount that are signed into a queue. And I can see in the hubs where I've got those spaces. Now, it goes without saying, not many have that, but there is potentially one that's potentially got one or two that are there. So that's where we can start to channel that across. We can increase the response time as by doing that. So that's why some of these systems we're bringing in are really key, because it's allowing us to make much better decisions on that resource as well.
Councillor Jackson.
Thank you. I see that obviously Northants, like a lot of other people, have got staff working from home, but also Northants are asking them to come in at least 2 days per week. Does this mean that you're having slight problems sort of manning your reception because they're working from home? Are they able to work from home just as efficiently as they are when they're in the office?
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. I think it's a good question. I think the reason why we put onto the that team charter around 2 days a week in the office for a full-time equivalent is around that collaborative working, sharing of ideas, that checking with those individuals. So when I first looked at where our workforce was in terms of their work base, there was actually some differences. So some were doing consistently in the office, some were having quite big delays between being in the office and working from home. And understandably, I had some concerns around actually how we supporting those individuals with those quite challenging calls, if there's quite a delay between them being at home and in the office space. You know, there's a lot to be said around that support network with a colleague, a manager, and so we agreed, the team agreed that we need to have a really good, consistent principle about how we operate hybrid work. And so that's how we came to that conclusion, as 2 days minimum in the office a week for a full-time equivalent. And it just means that we're able to actually support the teams as well as actually drive some really good performance as well, because that's critical. In terms of examples of whether they work better at home or not, it's, I guess we can all make assumptions on that. I would say that we employ, a really empowered team, and there's trust with that team as well. So there are ways in which we can monitor what people are doing, and the managers do that, but we also employ on trust, and that team are empowered, therefore, to give that same standard of service as they would do at home, as if they were in the office. The reason for bringing that method in is to actually increase that collaboration, to increase that, that well-being for colleagues, and that check-in. We were sufficiently manned on our receptions before that. It just, I noticed when going around the offices, I didn't see that many people in the hubs, and being quite new to the organisation, I kind of wanted to. So it just seemed a good opportunity to sort of address that in our team charter conversations.
Okay, anything else? No?
Okay, so if I go through I'll go through the stats for last year then, which is the full year, and then I'll then go on to some of the things we're going to be doing next. And as I say, we can then explore the team charter and the service plan. If any questions from members on that as well, I think it'd be really good to try and capture those points as and when they come up as well. Just bear with me 1 second, because during that conversation, my computer's locked itself. Okay, so for the full year, and then this is, I think what we'll see is when we do a comparison between 23 and 24, and then we do a comparison with 24, 25, there may be a difference in the data set that's reported simply because we had a full year in 24, 25 on the CRM database and with the telephony database. This data set would have commenced with the telephony platform from June last year, so there was issues in terms of gathering some of those data from some of the hubs for the first 3 months because of the legacy reporting on those platforms, and equally as well where they have been using a CRM system throughout the full year to capture this data. Excuse me. It also doesn't necessarily always reflect all those volumes, so it's a good indication of the contact. But what I'd probably say is it doesn't properly incorporate absolutely everything. So when we compare the two next year, it'll be interesting to see the differences. And I don't think I'll be sat here going, well, we've seen a 25% increase because that's the customer demand increasing by that much. There will be a caveat to say, actually, we've got all those teams utilising that system now for a full 12 months, and we can actually pull this data from that system for a full 12 months, and therefore it's more accurate, would probably be the caveat that would go with that data set. So in terms of the volumes that we handled last year, before I go into those, we have multiple contact channels, telephony, face-to-face, which incorporates our receptions and our appointments. So the reception-based interactions can be anything from 5 to 8 minutes. An appointment can be anything from 20 to 40 minutes to a full sign-up for a housing, which can take 60 minutes. So it does depend on the complexity of the service that the customer is requiring, and that can differ by which hub you're in, by which service we're providing in which hub. So again, you can start to see some of the things we want to address with service alignment for consistency as well. So the bulk of our contact is calls, and we handled 305,000 calls last year. We had just shy of 400,000 calls come in. So our answer rate was 80%. Now, we have a target of 90% that we wish to be absolutely delivering. So we didn't deliver that last year, but that's where we want to be heading for. In the service plan that accompanies this report pack, you can see an update of all the monitoring point and KPIs that we have for the service for this calendar year, and that does stipulate that one particularly for the contact centre. The answer rate...
Can I just get clarification, please? Because I'm looking at that on there. Just explain to me, in the paper it talks about speaking in plain English and not gobblethwack. What does calls offered mean?
Number of calls that actually come in, that actually hit the system.
If this is going to be discussed with everybody, it should be straightforward, shouldn't it? Calls received or whatever.
Yeah, certainly. There's probably loads of different ways in which it's terminised in the industry. So you have calls presented, calls offered, calls... I think in terms of calls received, that could be interpreted sometimes as we've actually taken that call and we've answered it. So the reason why I try and define between the two is because it's about what was actually came through versus actually what we managed to physically answer, and that's the acceptance rate there.
Clarification, does that include the calls that weren't answered?
Yes, so that's if you want to take it down to that way, the calls that we answered is the accepted column, the 305,000. If we then look at the difference between the offered and the accepted, you've then got a figure of what wasn't answered. But I think ultimately, where you've got such a big service that's handling that volume of calls, there is that element of the abandonment that's happened and we haven't managed to get to those calls. And if we were to look at some of those days, some of those weeks and some of those months where they peaked, we'd be able to see some patterns which helps us inform our resourcing going forward. But there's always going to be that caveat when you see data like that. That's the amount that weren't answered. But the team also did answer 305,000 calls last year from our residents. I've gone into the next steps part, which I think I'll probably bring into this conversation here around this, because I think it's really important to identify how we can start to be able to articulate the resource required versus the resource actually in situ. We've got a workforce management called Verint, which came as part of our telephony solution. And what that does is it integrates with the telephony system and pulls that into your work rosters. And it tells you per half an hour interval how many staff you need based on demand of those calls versus this time last year, last month, whatever window you're looking at. What we would be doing is looking at versus last year, because although we may see variations in contact, we do have a very similar cycle in terms of when our peaks happen. So we know that we have a peak around the first quarter of the year because that's when council tax letters go out, garden waste, and it's predominantly where, if you're doing recovery cycles, you're sending out more letters because of the amount of people who may not have paid their first instalments. We then see another peak around October time, which could be to do with schools admissions, and in January for schools admissions, and then it quietens off a little bit, dare I say, in December. We're to say we have a quieter month, but that's where you start to see that trend pop down and then it spikes back up again. And if you were to do that across 3 years, you'd see a very similar graph that shows those peaks. So when we're looking at the Verint system, we know if we say, this is our resourcing for this month, give me the incoming calls and tell me the amount of resource I need for this month, this year, we're going to have a much more informed decision around the resource base. So the teams are all set up on those systems. They're going to be going live with that start of May, so that the teams can start to then roster it. And we'll be able to see month by month the calls that are coming in versus the amount of people we need to answer those calls and where our staff are to be able to be in the best place to do so. The teams have a monthly meeting where they look at those risks that they've identified from that rostering. So we know in advance that we've got a point where it's going to be difficult, and that's taking into account things like any short-term, long-term absence as well as committed leave. They can discuss that then and think about opportunities in which we can share that resilience across the patch. In some instances, that could be restricted, dependent on the infrastructures we're working on, but they're taking that proactive step to make sure everything we can do within our capability is doing the right thing to address that resource for our customers. At the end of the month, so the previous month they'll do one meeting, but it does the start of the month for the one ahead. It also reviews the previous month, and we'll be able to just do a real-time update on what that resource was, amend any additional short-term absence, long-term absence and leave, and be able to present something that says, this is actually how much resource we had, this is how much we did need based on the call volumes, this is either the gap or the difference between the two, just to make sure we're really close to the detail, because with such a big team, but also with such a huge demand, it's really important we're close to that detail as much as possible. So I think probably to come back to the point around those lost calls, every single call hurts a team, it does, but we are doing everything we can to make sure we've got the appropriate resource there. And this is why these transformation streams are really helping us to do that. We didn't have that capability this time last year. So I think we've got to start on a low base and see that true picture to be able to then go, right, how do we take it forward and really change it?
I welcome that, identifying the spikes and putting the resources where it's needed. That's obviously common sense, and we should be doing that. Obviously, 85,000 calls is a tremendous amount, and I'm sure a lot of that was people they would call back anyway, and eventually get through. But I do worry if that's the amount of calls that are being missed. Our frontline staff, they want to answer their calls. They want to help our residents. We know that. They're actually excellent at the job they do. And I worry that because they can't do that job, that they get stressed if they're not being resourced enough. And I'm sure that we're working on that. The other one of this information in front of us, calls over accepted, I'm sure you've got a breakdown per department. Because, if we're going to look at that properly, and probably scrutiny rather than the AP should be doing that, but if we get that breakdown by department, and then we as council can see where is the priorities, because just now that's a general one, isn't it? And for us, the majority of when we are on our estates, it's housing, waste, etc. So, we can probably mention 4 or 5 that's the ones that we get talked about. So that breakdown would be useful to see.
Thank you, Councillor McGinn. And of course, if you want me to send that information to you separately, that's something I'm happy to share. It's not secret information, so I'm happy to give a breakdown by a service if that would help. So you can see those scorecards, you can see the volume of contact that's coming in for a specific service. But you're right, those ones are the big hitters. It's revenues and benefits, it's housing, it's waste services. They tend to be our biggest volumes. In fact, 50% of our calls are driven by revenues and benefits. And then when we have a housing stock of just shy of 10,000 properties, housing then competes next. But if you talk about services that have a touch point with majority of our residents, waste, council tax, they're going to be your biggest drivers. So yes, but we can break down so that we can see by line, by which hub that's affecting, and that's when we start to look at some of the transformational bits that are coming this year. By bringing those together, we'll be able to further improve that. So we've got an as is now versus actually once we've done that, what's the difference? How can we compare annual billing this year to annual billing next year? And putting those changes in, what's the difference?
That's key for us as elected members, having that feedback next year of the improvements and hopefully a big drop on 85,000, because that's what we as representatives of the public want to see, that customer service improved to the extent where we're not getting the problems that we get on.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think if we get to the point where we've put those things in place and we can see a change, but then let's just say that those calls have gone up by another 200,000 and that number is still a high number, at least we can demonstrate that we have put these steps in to proactively change that customer experience and try and ensure that those real pinch points of services are getting a better service. It will all depend on what that picture is and how we are and how we're operating, but we're doing absolutely everything we can with that resource, with those technologies available to drive it forward, and that's the key aspect. You'd hope with all that effort going in, there's going to be a change. You definitely hope so. I'd be a very disappointed man in a year's time if it's looking the same, because the team are working very hard to try and steer that ship. So absolutely, all very good points. Absolutely.
Councillor Jackson.
Thank you. Obviously, cloud-based on the phone system has storage, fantastic. but unfortunately, all this storage has a cost implication. How long do you have to store all this information?
So I don't know the ins and outs of in terms of how the governance over the infrastructure for the cloud is. So I know if we were to talk about call recordings in particular, that's a 1-year retention files, and they get automatically deleted when that 52-week calendar comes up in the system. So they're stored within the database on the cloud, and as that comes to that year, they get self-deleted off. So there will be different clauses in each contract that really lays that out. I can get that information. I just don't know that information to hand, if that makes sense. But there will be things that we'd have assessed as part of that cybersecurity aspect and the part of that information governance in terms of what we're doing with certain parts of information that we're storing as part of procuring a solution. But the most immediate thing is around the call recordings that does directly impact my service. It's 12-month retention, and it's self-deleted. Okay. So in terms of the other volumes that we handled last year, we had our face-to-face interactions, as I mentioned, as a reception and those appointments, just shy of 75,000, over 120,000 emails, and just under 30,000 e-forms. Now, the e-form number in particular is an interesting one, because what we'd like to see is that reduce, in the next 2 years. Because as we start to bring systems in, we want to see interactions that customers are doing on the website do integration more than e-form. So an e-form essentially would give the impression that you're filling out a form, but all it does is it just captures that data and sends it on an email, which means that the team have to physically do something with that data, either inputting it into a system or creating a case, etc., etc. If we start to build our systems from a point of integration, it will mean that the customer fills out those details, it goes into that database, we can then go into that database and essentially just click a few things connected to enabling it, and it's done. You speed up the processing time, it's far quicker, it's far more efficient. So hopefully that number of e-forms as we go for the next 24 months will decrease as we start to look at more integrations. And one of those, probably one that comes immediately to mind, is some of the integration capability with the Capita system, which is what hosts our revenues and benefits accounts. So at the moment, there will be different forms that you can do for moving in, moving out, discounts and exemptions. They will come through as an element of e-forms, or just get put into an email and come through. If a customer can do that integrated, it's far more efficient and effective. And you can see things like that of previous instances that I've used, where direct debits to a similar thing. You go in and you can just click it and it's done. And one of those great positives, which I think will be, which will have a huge impact on the phone, on phone calls in particular, is Arrangement Manager, which is for our accounts tax summons and arrangements when it goes to a summons stage. At the moment, all those contacts essentially come through a customer service centre, because we say, you've gone to summons, or you've got a reminder, please pay it or call us. You're likely to call us if you've got that letter, understandably. So what we'll be able to do by looking at that Arrangement Manager capability is giving people a choice, because not everybody wants to speak to you about a financial situation. So they want to be able to go on there and look at the different options to payments, work out how those monthly instalments look following that payment. They can do so, and it sends it through for us to review and accept as well, which again will be a huge impact for that proportion of customers that can do it and are happy to use that option. Whilst at the moment you have to come through to do it, or you fill out a form and it goes on an email and somebody's got to contact you when they get through this load of emails. It just speeds up the process and reduces that anxiety for customers somewhat. So that's probably a little bit more information why we might see a reduction on e-forms in the future, but that's the main reason for doing so. Speeds up the process, integrations are key. So in total, we handled just over 500,000 interactions last year. The number that's not included on there is all the case management inquiries that we also handled, which incorporates our complaints stage 1, stage 2 ombudsman inquiries, our MP and our member inquiries. So they all get handled by the team as well. And we hit 4,500 of those last year. Okay, so in terms of next steps, and I think Councillor McGee, I think this goes back to one of the points you raised, so apologies for not answering it for you in your previous question, around the impact of stress on the staff. So in terms of how we're developing the team and bringing that team together, we've committed to a learning development programme where each quarter there's a focused in-person training session for the advisors. Now that's being fed into themes that they're telling us about they want to be talking to or having the opportunity to discuss in a public forum together, as well as us identifying some of the key trends and some of the things that are happening, external factors that are going to be having an effect on our services and making sure we incorporate it. So, for example, Q1, we've been building a programme which is called Crisis Management for Call Handlers. And essentially what that is, it's dealing with the calls that come through where we do see quite a high amount where people are feeling, very low, they're feeling suicidal, and it's about how the staff have the skills to be able to have the conversations with those individuals and help give them the right signposting, but also listen and not be judgmental. And I think, that's a really hard thing to strike. How do you go from doing someone's bin to picking up a phone call that can be someone really vulnerable and really needing that help? And that's the nature of their environment they're operating. It can go from that to that. So we've identified that as a really key course for them to go through, and that's being funded by the NHS, Northampton NHS, and in conjunction with WNC and Northants to provide that training. So that's been externally funded basically to ensure that we've really invested in it rather than try and do it and not do it as thorough as well as we want to. So really positive, and we've got another 3 of those to map out throughout the year, as well as their ongoing access to learning modules. But it's a really key aspect because those examples do lead into that anxiety and work-related stress, and we need to ensure we're supporting staff with that. As I mentioned, we've got a team charter, which hopefully we can have a bit of a discussion on if I haven't talked too much and taken too much of the time. I've also articulated in the report where our hubs are based, just for a bit of context on a map. We've got 6 hubs across Northants. I include Rushden as a separate hub because of the footfall that we see through Rushden. In some instances, it's actually higher than the footfall that we see at our Thrapston hub, which is essentially where previous sovereign authorities Rushden fell under. And it's a really important presence that we have there due to the footfall that we see. We've given the team opportunities not only to be in the office those 2 days a week as a minimum, but to be able to work from another office of their choice at least once a month. And we'll commit to rostering them into that so they have the opportunity to go and work. Another area, it could be in some instances, the one that's closer to home for them. So I know I've got colleagues who work over in Wellingborough who live in Kettering and Thrapston. So to be able to give them the flexibility to go and work in a different office is really key, that collaboration. But then again, leading on to that resilience piece, if we've got issues manning reception in one office and someone lives within that town, they can go and do that and help us out as well, so that we can still provide the service that our customers need. It's just building on that resilience all the time within our service. And again, I've just talked a little bit there I've talked already about the workforce management system, and I touched on briefly around that transformation board that the team leaders are all leading on, and in fact actually kicked off yesterday in terms of getting some things on the map for that. So I'll just pause there for any questions at this point.
Councillor McGee?
I understand why we want that flexibility of working across Northants, but I do worry where we have expertise and staff that know an area well, and I think when you're talking to a customer who may have a problem, having someone that knows the area can make a big difference, and they've got more knowledge, sympathy, understanding of that. And are we actually forcing people to go into other areas, or is it a choice thing?
Certainly, that's the main reason for also doing that, is the staff actually ask for more awareness of what happens in each area. So that's the main reason for doing it, because if they're going to be getting, if we take it back to it's all interlinked, that joint inquiry option gets shared across those spaces. We want the teams to have that knowledge for an area which wouldn't specifically have fallen under an area they handled previously. So how do we do that? Well, by having the opportunity to work in that environment, speak to the team, understand the customer interactions more, you gather that awareness, and the teams are really they're asking for it, which is great. It's really good to see. But you know, that's why we want to have that collaboration, because some of our team have got you know, lengthy service. They really do know the customers. They live in the area, they know the area really well. And that really does help when you're having some interactions with customers, especially at point of mobility, to be able to share it across and have that common space. So yes, it's one of the reasons why we're doing it. In terms of having the opportunity, it's purely voluntary. It's not you've got to do this. The option is there. We discussed it in our team charter conversations around how can we do collaboration. Because probably what's important to note is the team charter was something we pulled together when I joined, following on the feedback of some customer service sessions that happened in the autumn prior to me starting. And on that, there was the opportunity to feedback on risks, things to celebrate, things we wanted to improve on as a team, and what they felt was missing. And one of those aspects was about that collaboration. So that's why we've incorporated it quite heavily in the team charter going forward.
Carry on.
I actually think that knowledge of the whole of North Northants is quite important, but having that very local knowledge does help. And that's across all staff. You know, I know when I became a county councillor, I took a lot of time going round the council, round the county, meeting different people, organisations, etc., to get to know the area. And I'm sure most councillors do that. And now that we're North Northants, we have done that even more. It's not just the frontline staff that need that knowledge of the area. I mean, I got feedback from a grants panel where an officer actually said, when he was speaking about a grants for Corby, where's Corby? I've never been to Corby. I think that's derogatory, and that's not acceptable by any means, especially in something like grants. We all have to take the time to get to know our area and get that knowledge so we can support the whole of North Northants.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, Councillor McGee. Personally, I also travel in from the county, so I live in Oxfordshire. I've spent time within the office spaces and the local areas, you know, meeting the teams, speaking to customers. For the first few weeks I joined, I actually spent some time in receptions, so I was interacting with the customers as well, because it's important to understand, you know, actually how each area works and how North Northants works, because every area will have a different approach and a different way of how life actually is. So that's really key. And I think it leads on to one of the things that's in our service plan for this year, is looking at how we do outreach. So when we talk about the outreach aspects, we've got a map that shows our permanent base locations within those key areas. But we're looking at how we can start to interlink in with other areas around this land space, because it's a huge land space, North Northants. How do we get into those areas with customers who need our services but really struggle to access our services or aren't aware of how to access our services? So it's a more proactively driven part of our service. We're working with looking at the local area partnership principles to ensure that we're being really strategic about that placement. So at the moment we have 3 libraries that we do within the Kettering area, but you know, acknowledging the fact that isn't across the whole of North Northants. That's why we're looking at it to address that, you know, that inequality basically. I've got a meeting next week with the VCSE to look at how we can start to, you know, approach and speak to some of those volunteer sectors in North Northants. And the idea really is if there's a group meeting somewhere, we're there. We're going to have a guaranteed footfall there. Customers are there. They're already seeing a partner. We go along and we speak to them. So that's the approach we're also going to be taking, to try and build on that local knowledge, because all the teams will be involved in that, and it'll be across the whole of the district.
Yeah, that's excellent to hear. It's always been a bugbear of mine that we expect people to come to us. If they're having events and things out there, we should be tagging along and joining the events rather than expecting them to come first. So that's good to hear.
Saying the model essentially can be really efficient. So it's a way of delivering a service to a customer without it being derogatory to the amount that we're trying to spend versus the value we're getting for it. I've done it in previous councils, and it's been really effective. It's worked really well.
Councillor Jackson.
This is one item I can't quite understand. Most employers encourage their employees to interact with one another, and I can never understand how you can get this if you're working from home.
So that's one of the reasons, again, for bringing that hybrid working approach more streamlined in, because we need to make sure that, you know, our service in particular is customer facing. I can't realistically have a team working multiple weeks from home when we're here to serve customers. My role is customer facing, which is why I will always be in the area as well every single week, because that's the remit of my job. So we've been really clear, and the team are really clear on that objective as well. We can operate a hybrid working, so, you know, having the ability to be in the office and from home does work, but bringing that consistent weekly principle will really help that. And, you know, we've already seen this month alone, since we implemented it, you know, a difference between the colleagues who are actually in the office, and I think it's already having that benefit of sharing, you know, some of those frustrations that they might be having, especially with some of the peak calls at the moment, as well as that you know, actively learning aspect. And we've got some new colleagues joining us in the next few months, so to be able to have the footfall of staff in the office is also going to support those new colleagues coming in. So it absolutely is possible. We have an element of in-person management and one-to-ones. We also do them remotely. The meetings that I do with the team on a monthly basis are remote, but again, we make sure that every single hub is in attendance for that. They're rostered on it, so they know they've got an attendance for it. It's not just the same people every single month. So we are making sure that we are touching all points to ensure participation as well, because that's really key.
Okay.
Fantastic. So in terms of the accompanying papers, the charter and the service plan, were there any questions from members at all on that, or any points of clarification that you wanted me to go through?
Sorry, Chair, I did have a look at that, but I got the answer through what you've already said anyway.
Thank you.
Are we going to, Chair, if I may, are we going to be talking about the difficult subject of members? Thanks.
More than welcome to. You know, I know it's a difficult subject, but equally, you know, I'm happy to talk about it, because as we do with everything we're talking about with customer services, unless we look at what the problem are, we can't change it, can we? So yes, more than happy to. If you've got any questions you want to sort of talk about with that, I can give an overview of the business case for that to help to start with, and then we can take it from there.
Chair, if I may, a brief overview of the business case, because I'm sure most of us in here have actually heard that, because you've been to Scrutiny in other places, but a brief interview would be welcome. But my main point, Chair, if you want to save time, is we are talking about in the business case October before members get that real support, because just now cross-party and having listening to Scrutiny, there was a lot of frustrations across party about the way members' support is there. I honestly believe that we shouldn't be waiting till October. And I know you've got a very difficult job in these transformations, but we've got 70 odd members, whatever it is now, and they're feeling like they're second-class citizens. And the difficulties they're having is absolutely horrendous. I was in this room last night with all the Labour group, and we were discussing it, and there was a lot of anger, not just frustration, anger. So I am pleading through your chair and the executive that it becomes more of a priority rather than October. We bring that support forward a bit.
Thank you. I say it's something that I've recognised since joining. I know we've had a few separate conversations around it, because I do acknowledge it is something that's really important, and my approach has always been a very collaborative working approach of members, and that's exactly why I've picked it up as something we need to be doing. To give some further context around the timeframes on that, the resource available to do or build a system technically wasn't available for this financial year. The business case I pulled together and put forward articulated the fact we couldn't wait till next year to be able to start laying out a programme of works for this. We needed to get it done in this year. But essentially the team that are available to do that, or are doing at the same time that those last two that phase 3 of the onboarding for CRM. And the good news is they're experienced in the PlaceCube platform, which is where these modules will be going on to. But I guess the risk that is they've got to get those two CRM databases on because they're coming end of life, and there will be financial impact if we don't do that because we have to pay for additional subscriptions to them. So we, there was always going to be that risk, but we really recognise that there is a need to bring that case management system in for all 3 case types: complaints, members, and MPs. It's really manual. It takes a lot of time for members, MPs, and complaints to interact via that method, and equally for us to be able to process it and get all that sent through. Now, the reason for members being at the back end of that work cycle is not in any way to give the impression of second-class citizens at all. It's been done that way because the module we're building is different to the module we're using for complaints and MPs. So the complaints and MPs module is a one-way access point. It comes in and the automaton will then manage it from that system base. The response goes to the customer and the MP. The members module is being built differently to enable members to have a more dashboard case view analysis of it, as opposed to that it goes into the system and you can't see anything out of it until it comes out to you. The idea is inquiry goes in, integrates into the system, you have your own dashboard view to see that, and you can see the progress and you can see which ones you've got outstanding. The responses also come through that system, so they will then get attached to that dashboard you've got, so you'll be able to then see the response to that case all in one place. Because the feedback we've had is not only the volume of emails that you get through as members as a consequence of that, because you've got the original email from the constituent, your email to members, then there's two emails once it's been logged because it's the auto-apply and the confirmation, and then the response email, so you're already at 5 emails per inquiry. It's trying to take that away, but also give you a dashboard view. It's really easy to see about that is due today, tomorrow, it's for this constituent. I can see it really easily, as opposed to, I imagine you've probably got multiple folders in your mailbox for each constituent. So that's the reason for bringing those principles in to that build, as opposed to adopting the same build for the complaints and MP inquiry process. But by doing that, it's a different module on that PlaceCube platform. We want to make sure we build it to meet those needs.
Just say, I actually welcome that, and it's a great system for those of us as members that can use IT, and I will put that suggestion out there. Not every member is IT savvy. There are some that's not, so we need to still be able to support them. There'll probably probably a majority will manage it, but there will be a few that don't, and we need to remember that, I think. But I do welcome it. It's the timescale it's taking that I have my reservations on, because, as an ex-leader of a group and being on executives before, trying to keep members getting that support is a very difficult thing. And when anger boils over through a system, the leadership get the brunt of that, and I'm sure it's across all parties, not just mine. And it's very, very frustrating for our residents who, when we put something in, actually by the time they get it done, they could have lost a house or ended up in hospital because it's not been dealt with in the timescale that we need it dealt with.
I certainly agree with those sentiments, and that's, in the meantime, we are going to be working on ways in which we can ensure that we're building on that process, because a system alone is not necessarily going to deal with all those things. It'll give you greater visibility, but we've also got to ensure that our officers' approaches are aligned and they're on board. So there's going to be a whole thing around the training, the implementation and the awareness of it for both sides. There'll be the opportunity as well for members to take part in user access training to help make sure that it's meeting those requirements as well. So again, if we've got members who don't usually interact with IT on that scale, we can bring them in on that user access to ensure it's meeting those needs, as well as having those training tools available. We're going to be doing show and tell sessions with the project manager for members when we go through it. So there's going to be a real openness and involvement with members. I think, the reality is, in terms of the resource that we have available to roll that out and the time frames at which we've got to do it, that we've given as much time as we can as we can sort of factor in, basing on our experience with the system so far, we could be in a position that actually that moves from an implementation from March 2025 to nearer Christmas. But we don't know until we necessarily get into unpacking that module, because it could be bug fixes, as alluded into the what didn't work so well in the Place Cube element to start with. In phase one, there was a number of fixes we had to do with the supplier to get the system working to where we wanted it to. But as you start to roll these things out, it gets better, and you know what you're looking for. It could be that therefore it moves to the better and we get it done sooner. But I didn't want to be in a position that I was given a false hope and putting too much pressure on that team to deliver something that ultimately wouldn't be achievable. I wanted to be really open about the fact that this is something we want to get right for members and something we want to do well. And the way to do that is to ensure that we've got the appropriate resource and that ability to do it in a timely manner to make sure it's there. But in the meantime, we're working really hard with services to drive that adherence. This week, when we've sent the overdues, because I send the overdue cases every week to the services, I've also gone to key services and said, can we start sharing your policies, your process maps? Because what we want to do on the intranet is actually have a bit of a knowledge base for members around, well, what is the Keyway application process? Because that might not answer the inquiry that you get for your constituent today, but for another member it may do. And it's therefore trying to take away having to go through that process if we can, because we've given that information at the front. I do appreciate the frustrations behind it, and I can assure you it's something that does have a proportion of my time and my attention to get it right for you.
Oh, mate, and I'm sure it's very difficult for you, especially with the pressure that does come from members, and I, to an extent, can share that frustrations. But again, going back to being a very simple person and thinking that we, and red tape and local government, overthink things or overcomplicate it. I heard lots of reasons why we can't do it. What I would like to have heard is reasons how we can make that come quicker for that support. But obviously, it's too difficult a subject or too difficult a process to get in quicker.
I think also, Councillor McGee, I think some of the frustrations of members is the fact that at the moment the member inquiry service is one that potentially can take up to 10 days. But can I also suggest that if there is something that's urgent, and you alluded to earlier somebody losing their home, then there are ways and means of short-circuiting that system. That should not go through the member inquiry system. That should be picking up the phone, and either picking up the phone to a portfolio holder or picking up the phone to an assistant director, or even to a director. So that is the ultimate safety net, so that we don't, nobody wants to be told, oh, you're going to be losing your home, therefore we'll put you in the system and we might have an answer for you in 10 days. That doesn't work, and we get that. And, I would suggest to you and any other member, if there is an issue, then pick up the phone, talk to us, and, we will make sure that we action that as quick as possible.
We also have the phone line that I've put in on the review, the process at the start of January, which goes through to the team. So again, that's a way in which we can get it we can escalate it up to the director level.
Yeah.
I know we've not had a huge influx of calls through it, but the members have been using it, and they've been absolutely correct in doing so when they've raised those inquiries, which is positive. But I think it's just that broader awareness that is there for such situations, because we need to make sure that it's going up. And in some instances where I have seen some of the urgent ones come through, the good news is that level is aware, and it's just hopefully by having that contact from a member, it's just getting that sharper focus for us to move it on and get a resolution as quickly as possible. But yeah, echo the chair's comments, and just to reiterate, there is that phone number we've got as well, which goes through to my complaint practitioners, not the contact centre, so it's on a separate hunt group as well.
Okay. Councillor Jackson.
I have no complaints with it whatsoever. I must be very fortunate. I seem to have hit them on a good day every time.
Thank you. It's good to know the positive interactions as well of it, because ultimately
We have one satisfied member.
you know, it's trying. We want to make sure that it works. You know, and that's why it's important to be aware when it's not. I'm completely open to being made aware when it's not. There's no closed doors.
Okay. Have you?
Yes, so the other two attachments are there if there's any further questions, but essentially that's everything I had today. I really valued the feedback and opportunity to discuss it with members. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McGee.
Having been a member of 2 EAPs, they're the one I've always asked for, because I'm sure you don't either as an executive member. We don't want to be a talking shop. So the things that we do talk about, how do you reflect back that they are useful, they may get put into a document or be used? How do we reflect that back to the members that attend this, so we just don't feel like we're talking rather than trying to get something positive?
Okay, well, from my point of view, it depends on what it is. Myself and Simon have monthly meetings to discuss the whole concept of customer services and how it's all working, and the things that have been said will be fed back into that. If it's a matter of policy or something that's coming to an executive meeting, then it will be reflected in that, so it'll be reflected in the policy making going forward as well. So there are several aspects to that, and certainly I've got several pages of notes from today's meeting, so that will all be actioned. And to be honest with you, some very, very constructive comments all the way around.
Thank you, Chair, and I do appreciate that statement. But what we managed to do in the other EP is we had an action sheet attached to the next meeting, just to say, this is what was said, this is what was took on board, why it was took on board, and this is not took on board, and this is the reasons why. And what it does make us feel is, because I know that a lot of my members and some of your own feel that EAPs can be talking shops if we don't see some sort of action report coming back. So having a very simple A4 sheet in the minutes saying this is the outcome of that discussion would be extremely helpful.
Yeah. Having said that, most of the things that we've discussed today are things that will be evidenced by actually what we see in practice, not by what's just put on a sheet. But I'll take that on board, and I'll work something up. I'll discuss it with Guy and David and Simon, and we'll try to put something together and do that. But yeah, I value that. I think that would be a good idea.
The officer's quite upset with me now because it's more work.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is a forward list of items for this EAP. Now, Guy's at another meeting at the moment, which is why he's not here today. We have got another paper coming forward, haven't we, Simon?
Yes, so it's a June meeting, I believe, isn't it? There's got another policy coming forward, which is the update to the complaints policy. Members will remember from the February update when we talked about the unacceptable customer behaviour and the remedy policy that the complaints one was forthcoming based on the new statutory requirements from the Ombudsman. And some of those key changes were around the response dates for stage 1 complaints, alongside the statutory requirement for learning plans, as well as a self-assessment for the service as well. So we are at the moment just finalising that draft. We were hoping to get it to this meeting today, but unfortunately due to other pressures that we've had within the service, it's not proven viable, but we are actively continuing with that, and we will bring that to the next meeting. I believe as well the reason for myself and Guy putting on there around 4 plan for agenda items to bring is we're both really keen to ensure that we always have these meetings and keep them booked in, and we have something that we're bringing through and we're discussing, we're getting that involvement and that advice back. Me personally coming into the authority, I find them really valuable. It's a great opportunity to speak to members and actually talk about what we're doing and ways in which we can improve it, and the feedback is always really invaluable. So it's thinking about what is it as members as well would you like us to be bringing more broadly. And there are a few things that I can sort of throw out there that we're looking to, and I would be looking to incorporate on that. But equally, if there's something you'd like in anticipation to be prepared, I'm also open to those suggestions as well. So one of the future items, for example, would be looking at the customer experience and digital strategy, which we're in the process of drafting, and then we'll be bringing to a future EAP to gather those thoughts and initial insights on as well.
And
I'm very reluctant to make suggestions given I don't sit on the committee in full time, Chair.
Chair, through you, we had one drop in yesterday actually, a future item for this particular meeting. Communications, consultation and engagement, which has come through from an officer yesterday, which Guy is aware of.
okay.
That's scheduled for, he wants to bring that to the October meeting though, so we're way off that, but it is another thing to add on to the forward plan.
Plenty of time to think about that one. Yeah, I was just looking through the executive forward plan, and we've got most of them financial coming up, because obviously we're the capital outturn and the budget outturn for the end of the year. So it's things like that which are probably things that rest better with scrutiny than it does with an EAP. But I think the performance of and the way we go forward with customer services is a useful one to have there on quite a regular basis.
Yes, I agree. I think it's really, especially with such a lot of change happening this year. We were discussing yesterday with the team leaders and managers. It's actually a big portfolio of change. It's needed. We can't wait for another year to start thinking about these things. So the whole idea of holding that project stream board together is to articulate what's already happening on that roadmap and what do we want to try and get in as well based on the time we have and looking through the year ahead. So yeah, I definitely agree. It's worth us having that continuous dialogue because, you know, as I said at scrutiny last week, there are no secrets. I'd rather have these things discussed because at least that way then you're, as members, are well informed. So when constituents are speaking to you equally, you're just as informed as we are with the information that's available.
Yeah. Okay. So that is everything that I have on my agenda. If there is no other comments from you gentlemen, then I will close the meeting. Thank you very much for your time. And thank you and goodbye to those who are watching online.